My name is Eleanor Carter, and 6 weeks ago, I was just an ordinary piano teacher struggling to make ends meet in a cramped apartment. My life was simple, quiet, almost invisible, until one midnight phone call shattered everything. The world knew my grandfather, Henry Carter, as a billionaire tycoon, but to me, he was the only person who ever truly believed in me. That night, I learned he had died in a horrific accident. Welcome to Revenge, Amy. Your support is what keeps us going and allows us to continue telling inspiring stories of justice, healing, and self-worth. Help our channel reach our first 1,000 subscribers by liking and subscribing. Now let's get back to the story. By the next morning, his lawyer, Samuel Whitaker, summoned the family to his office. I walked in expecting cold formality, maybe the mention of a token inheritance, never imagining what I would actually hear. When Samuel opened the will, his voice was steady and deliberate. Henry Carter leaves the entirety of his estate, financial assets, real estate, investments, and holdings valued at approximately $7 billion, to his granddaughter Eleanor Carter. For a moment the room froze in stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. My parents' eyes burned with entitlement, while my brother slammed his fist on the oak table. "That money belongs to us," my father, Edward Carter, shouted, his voice trembling with fury. "You can't give billions to a piano teacher," my mother, Margaret Carter, hissed, clutching her pearls as if the world was crumbling around her. My brother, Brandon, sneered and jabbed a finger in my direction. "Where's my cut? I need capital for my startup. Grandpa promised me." I could barely process the words. I sat frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, my throat dry. I wanted to believe this was a nightmare, but the fire in their eyes told me it was real. All of their hopes, all of their greed, had fixed themselves on me. Samuel raised his hand, trying to restore order. Mr. Carter anticipated this reaction. He made his decision deliberately and of sound mind. His wishes are binding. But the protests grew louder, angrier. My father's chair toppled as he leapt to his feet, face crimson with rage. My mother's voice cracked as she shrieked that I would ruin everything. Brandon slammed his palm on the table, demanding his share. My hands trembled in my lap, but then I heard my grandfather's voice echo in my memory, quiet, calm, reassuring. "Money can buy you a piano, Eleanor, but it can't buy you music. That comes from here." He had tapped my chest, where my heart beat. I took a breath, lifted my chin, and whispered a single word that changed everything. No. The room went deathly still. My father's jaw clenched. My mother gasped as though I had betrayed them. Brandon swore under his breath. But I didn't take it back. I wouldn't. That night, the storm truly began. My parents' anger boiled over until they shouted that if I wouldn't hand over the fortune, I had no place in their home. By dawn, I was standing on the curb with nothing but a duffel bag, my passport, and the key my grandfather had once pressed into my palm. The gates to his mansion loomed in the distance, waiting for me. I had no idea who or what was waiting inside. Before that night, my life had never been glamorous. I wasn't rich, powerful, or even noticed. I was simply Eleanor Carter, 26 years old, a piano teacher at a modest music studio tucked into a corner of downtown. My days were filled with children stumbling through scales, clumsy renditions of beginner pieces, and the rare prodigy whose fingers danced across the keys with effortless grace. The money was barely enough. My paycheck covered rent for my tiny apartment, groceries if I budgeted carefully, and the constant fear that my second-hand car might die on the highway one day. And yet, in spite of the struggle, I wasn't unhappy. I found beauty in small things. The way a child's face lit up when they finally played a song without mistakes, or the quiet evenings when I could curl up with sheet music, letting melodies soothe me until my neighbors banged on the wall in annoyance. My parents, however, never understood. To Edward and Margaret Carter, success wasn't measured in joy or fulfillment. It was measured in luxury cars, designer wardrobes, and prestigious social connections. To them, my career was a failure, an embarrassment. Teaching music was a hobby, not a life, as my father often sneered. My mother would roll her eyes at family gatherings whenever I talked about a recital, preferring instead to brag about Brandon's latest big opportunity. Even if it was little more than reckless spending disguised as ambition, the truth was I had always felt like a stranger in my own family. My father was obsessed with climbing corporate ladders and impressing his peers. He rarely spoke to me unless it was to criticize. My mother cared more about maintaining her place in the right social circles than asking her daughter how she was doing. Brandon, the golden child, could do no wrong. Spoiled, reckless, and entitled, he was always forgiven no matter the damage he caused. The only person who ever made me feel like I was enough was Grandpa Henry. From the time I was a little girl, his mansion wasn't a palace of wealth to me. It was a sanctuary. I remembered running through its marble halls, not caring about the priceless art or polished chandeliers, only chasing the sound of Grandpa's laughter echoing after me on Sunday afternoons. We sat together at his grand piano. His fingers, surprisingly nimble for a man in his 70s, would glide across the keys as he leaned close to whisper, "Eleanor, money can buy you a piano, but it can't buy you music. That comes from here." He tapped my chest where my heart beat wildly. Those lessons went beyond music. They were lessons about life, about dignity, about what it meant to carry yourself with integrity. While my parents flaunted their wealth and status, Grandpa lived simply with quiet strength. He drove the same black sedan for years. He wore tailored suits older than I was. He never cared to impress anyone, only to live with honor. That I spent more weekends at his mansion than in my own home. We baked cookies together in the massive kitchen, played chess by the fireplace, and walked the garden where he proudly pointed out the roses he had planted himself. He listened when I talked about my dreams, truly listened without mocking or dismissing me. Sometimes I wondered if he saw what I saw, that I didn't belong in the family I was born into. My mother always flinched when I chose to stay with him instead of joining the family on vacation. My father muttered that Grandpa was spoiling me, but Grandpa never seemed to mind. In his smile I felt a silent promise. "One day, Eleanor, you'll understand why I've kept you close." Back then, I thought it simply meant he loved me more than the others. I didn't realize it was also a warning, foreshadowing the storm that was waiting for me. It was a Tuesday evening when my world collapsed. I was at my small kitchen table, grading practice sheets, half listening to the groans and creaks of my old apartment building. The phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. For a second, I almost let it go to voicemail, but something deep in my gut urged me to answer. "Miss Carter," a heavy voice said. "This is Officer Mark Daniels from the State Highway Patrol. I'm sorry to inform you that your grandfather, Henry Carter, was involved in a collision tonight. His vehicle was struck by a drunk driver. He didn't make it." The pen slipped from my fingers, leaving a black streak of ink across the page. Didn't make it? The words didn't register. Grandpa wasn't supposed to die. He was supposed to be eternal. He was supposed to be at my student's recital next month, clapping the loudest. He was supposed to call me tomorrow to ask if I'd eaten. He wasn't supposed to be gone. But he was. The funeral passed in a blur of black suits and meaningless condolences. To me, the mansion that had once been a safe haven now felt like a stage for hypocrisy. My parents immediately seized control, barking orders at the funeral director as if they were arranging a corporate gala. "This arrangement is unacceptable," my father, Edward Carter, snapped at the florist. "These hors d'oeuvres are beneath us." My mother, Margaret, scolded the caterers. That I stood in silence, feeling like an outsider at the farewell of the one person who had ever truly loved me. My mother clutched her pearls, whispering loudly to a guest, "Can you believe he drove himself? A billionaire. And still behaving like some common man." My father's eyes weren't red from grief. They were sharp, restless, calculating. I could almost hear the numbers running through his head. Assets, accounts, stocks. Even in the presence of my grandfather's casket, he was thinking only of what could be gained. And then there was Brandon. He leaned lazily against a marble column, scrolling on his phone, sighing as though the whole service was an inconvenience. When I asked if he was okay, he didn't even look up. "I'll be fine once we know what we're getting," he muttered. That I wanted to scream. How could they talk about money when the man who had held our family together lay lifeless in front of us? I approached the casket quietly, staring down at Grandpa's peaceful face. His hands were folded neatly, his expression calm, almost as though he were simply napping. Leaning closer so no one else could hear, I whispered, "I'll make you proud, Grandpa. I promise." But when I turned, I realized no one else in that room felt the same. My Aunt Lillian Price and Uncle Charles, people who hadn't visited in years, sobbed dramatically for the cameras, then immediately stopped once the photographers left. My parents smiled for sympathy when mourners approached, but their eyes hardened every time someone mentioned Grandpa's fortune. Brandon looked bored, checking his watch as if he couldn't wait for it to be over. I lingered after the service ended, not wanting to leave Grandpa behind. The house, the garden, the piano, everything felt haunted now. For the first time, I understood the full weight of loneliness. Without him, I had no anchor, no protection point. 2 weeks later, the phone rang again. This time, the caller ID read Samuel Whitaker. His voice was calm but firm. "Eleanor, your grandfather's will is ready to be read. He requested your presence and that of your immediate family. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp, at my office." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. My life had already been turned upside down. I had no idea that meeting would change everything forever. The next morning, I stood outside Samuel Whitaker's office, a converted Victorian house with dark wood beams and stained glass windows that cast long shadows across the porch. My palms were clammy against the handle of my umbrella, though it wasn't raining, just an overcast sky that felt heavy, almost like it knew a storm was coming inside. The air smelled faintly of leather and strong coffee. Samuel greeted me with a solemn smile, his silver hair neatly combed, his voice soft. "Eleanor, your grandfather spoke of you often," he said. "He was proud." "Thank you," I whispered, my throat tight. Before I could say more, the door burst open. My parents swept in as if they owned the place. My father, Edward Carter, adjusted his expensive watch with a sharp flick of his wrist, while my mother, Margaret, clicked forward on her heels, each step like a gunshot against the hardwood floor. Behind them came my brother, Brandon, in sunglasses at 9 in the morning, his shirt half-tucked, a smirk plastered across his face. "Let's get this over with," Edward barked. "We all know how this goes. My father built the empire, and as his only son, I'll be managing it now." Samuel's polite smile didn't falter, but I caught a flicker in his eyes. He gestured toward the conference room. A long oak table stretched beneath a chandelier, and as I sat down near him, my parents claimed the head seats like royalty already crowned. Brandon sprawled carelessly across a chair, sneakers propped against the table's edge. Samuel cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and opened a thick leather folder. Henry Carter was of sound mind when he updated his will last year. He underwent cognitive evaluations, and I was present for every signing. There is no question of his capacity. "Yes, yes," my father interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "Read it." Samuel began. "I, Henry Carter, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my final will and testament. To my beloved granddaughter Eleanor Carter, I leave the entirety of my estate, financial assets, real estate, investments and holdings, valued at approximately $7 billion. The words crashed into me like thunder. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. $7 billion? To me? The room exploded. "What?" my father roared, shooting to his feet so violently his chair toppled over. His face turned crimson, veins bulging at his temples. "That's insane. He would never bypass me." Margaret clutched the table with white-knuckled hands, her face pale with shock. $7 billion to a girl who teaches piano? She doesn't know the first thing about handling money. Brandon ripped off his sunglasses and slammed his palm on the wood. "Where's my cut? I need capital for my new platform. He promised me." I shook my head, tears pricking my eyes. I didn't even know he rewrote his will. I never asked him for anything. Samuel lifted a hand calmly. Mr. Carter anticipated this reaction. He made it clear that his decision was intentional. He stated that his son and daughter-in-law had been provided for generously during his lifetime. His wish was for the fortune to pass solely to Eleanor. "You manipulated him," Edward snarled, pointing at me like an accusation. You whispered in his ear while he was old and confused. Before I could respond, Samuel reached for a small remote and pressed a button. A screen on the wall flickered to life. And there he was, Grandpa Henry, sitting in his leather chair, hands folded, voice calm but firm. "If you're watching this, it means I have passed," he began. "Edward, Margaret, Brandon. I love you as family, but I can no longer ignore what you've become. Greed has blinded you. You see me as a wallet, not as a father, not as a grandfather. Eleanor is different. She visits because she cares, not because she wants. She lives with integrity. She will carry my legacy with dignity." My mother gasped, Brandon muttered a curse, and Edward shouted at the screen. "This is manipulation." He wasn't thinking straight. But Samuel's voice cut through the chaos. "The will is legally binding. Contesting it will be costly, and given the documentation, nearly impossible." Edward's glare burned into me. His voice low and venomous. "This isn't over, Eleanor. You think you can defy us? You'll regret it." My grandfather's words still echoed in my ears. "She will carry my legacy with dignity." I didn't feel victorious. I felt terrified. Because I finally understood, the fortune wasn't just money. It was a test. And my family would do everything in their power to take it from me. That evening, as the sun set behind the Carter estate, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. "Edward Carter. Come home. 6 o'clock. We'll settle this as a family." There was no question mark, no softness, just an order. My chest tightened as I read it. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to stay far away. But some foolish corner of my heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, grief had twisted their words at the lawyer's office. Perhaps now they would calm down. I was wrong. When I walked into the living room, it no longer resembled the warm family space I remembered. My mother's cocktail chairs had been rearranged like a boardroom. My father stood by the fireplace, a tumbler of scotch in hand. My mother, Margaret, perched on the edge of a designer seat, her eyes cold and calculating. Brandon sprawled across the sofa, his laptop open, fingers typing furiously until he saw me. "Sit," Edward commanded, his voice like steel. I obeyed, clutching my hands tightly in my lap. "You know what needs to happen," he said evenly, though I could hear the rage simmering beneath. "Sign the estate over to me. I'll manage it properly. You'll receive a generous allowance, 10%. More money than you could ever need. 10%. I repeated, stunned. My voice trembled. "That's more than $700 million, Margaret cut in smoothly, her smile practiced. "Enough to buy a mansion, enough to live like a queen. You don't need responsibility, Eleanor. Leave that to your father." Brandon slammed his laptop shut and leaned forward. $700 million is plenty. I need the rest to launch my company. Grandpa wanted me to succeed. Don't be selfish. The words cut me like knives. Selfish. I thought of Grandpa's smile when I played piano, of the way he reminded me that dignity mattered more than wealth. I thought of the will, of the video he'd left. He hadn't chosen me because I wanted his money. He'd chosen me because I didn't. I swallowed hard and whispered, "No." The room erupted. Margaret shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "Ungrateful little brat. After everything we've given you. Private schools, lessons, a roof over your head, you dare defy us." Brandon sneered. "Enjoy being rich and alone. You'll crawl back once you realize money can't hug you at night." But it was Edward's words that carved deepest. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, the kind that froze the air. "If you walk out of this house tonight without signing, you are no longer my daughter. Don't come back. Don't call. Don't expect a single ounce of help. You'll be dead to us." My breath caught. A part of me wanted to cry, to beg him to take it back. But another part, the one Grandpa had nurtured, stood firm. "I guess I've been dead to you for years," I said quietly. "You never saw me. You only saw what you wanted." Edward's face twisted with fury. He grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the front door. Margaret followed, barking orders like a general. "Pack a bag. 30 minutes. After that, the locks will be changed." I stumbled into my childhood bedroom, hands shaking as I stuffed clothes into a duffel. The walls were lined with old recital trophies and posters from a girl who had once dreamed of belonging. I grabbed my passport, my grandmother's quilt, and the photograph of Grandpa and me at the piano. Everywhere I looked, ghosts stared back at me. When I returned to the hallway, Edward was waiting, arms crossed, eyes cold. He opened the front door and gestured outward. Out. The night air was icy. My bags felt heavier than they were. Margaret's voice followed me like poison. You'll regret this, Eleanor. Money won't keep you warm. Family is forever. I turned, tears burning my eyes, but my voice steady. Then why did you just throw me away? The door slammed shut behind me, and just like that, I was homeless. But I wasn't defeated. In my pocket was a small brass key, engraved with Henry Carter's initials, the key to his mansion. The one place left that felt like home. I gripped it tightly. If they thought they could strip me of everything, they were wrong. This was only the beginning. The drive to my grandfather's estate felt longer than it truly was. My old sedan rattled along the dark road, headlights cutting weak beams through the mist. My duffel bags were piled on the passenger seat, but the only thing I clutched was the small brass key engraved with Henry Carter's initials. He had pressed it into my hand last year with a wink. Someday you might need this, Eleanor. I never imagined that day would come so soon. When the iron gates of the Carter estate appeared, they loomed like sentinels in the night, tall and unyielding, the family crest carved into the center. For a moment I hesitated. Could I really cross that threshold without Grandpa here? Would the house feel hollow without his laughter? But then I remembered the slam of my parents' front door, the venom in my father's voice. You're no longer my daughter. I had nowhere else. The key slid smoothly into the lock. With a groan of metal, the gates creaked open. I drove up the winding driveway lined with ancient oaks whose branches seemed to bow as I passed. When the mansion finally came into view, its windows glowed softly against the dark sky. As if the house itself had been waiting for me, I parked in the circular drive and climbed the steps. My hand trembled as I slid the key into the front door. The lock clicked, the door swung open, and a familiar scent wrapped around me. Lemon polish and cedarwood, the fragrance of my childhood. Miss Eleanor. I jumped, nearly dropping my bag. From the shadows stepped a tall man with silver-streaked hair in a perfectly pressed uniform. Recognition flooded me. Arthur Hayes, I whispered. Grandpa's loyal butler, who had been with him for more than 25 years. He gave me a faint smile, his eyes warm though lined with years of service. Yes, miss. I was with your grandfather until the end. And now, his gaze softened, I suppose I am with you. Emotion clogged my throat. I thought everyone would be gone. That I'd be alone. Arthur shook his head firmly. Mr. Carter anticipated trouble. He told me, if anything happens, protect Eleanor. She is the true heir. He left detailed instructions. He led me into the study, where a fire already crackled in the hearth. I keep the house running just as he wished, Arthur explained. Your grandfather insisted it remain ready. He said one day you might need sanctuary here. I sank into one of the leather chairs, the warmth chasing away the night's chill. For the first time since being thrown out, I felt something close to safety. But it was fleeting. My voice came out in a whisper. What happens now, Arthur? My family won't stop. They already threatened me. His expression darkened. They came here once after the funeral, tried to take jewelry, documents. I stopped them. But Mr. Carter knew they would return. That's why he prepared. You'll see tomorrow. Tomorrow. Arthur nodded. Mr. Whitaker will arrive. He has files, recordings, and letters your grandfather left for you. There are others too, people your grandfather trusted. He built a wall of protection around you, Eleanor. But you must stand firm. I clutched the quilt I had carried from my childhood bedroom, its worn fabric soft against my fingers. The house hummed around me, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the faint whir of hidden security cameras I hadn't noticed before. For the first time since the will reading, I felt something stronger than fear, resolve. My family wanted war. They would soon discover I wasn't defenseless. My grandfather's mansion wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. A legacy. And I was ready to defend it. That night, I slept in the guest room I had always used as a child. The sheets were freshly laundered, and a book I'd left months ago still sat on the nightstand, bookmarked neatly in place. It was as if Grandpa had known I would return, not as a visitor, but as the one who truly belonged. When morning light streamed through the curtains, I woke to the sound of voices downstairs. Panic clutched me at first. Had my parents already found me? I hurried to the landing, only to see Arthur at the door, speaking with a familiar figure. "Miss Eleanor," Arthur called gently. "It's Mr. Whitaker." Relief washed over me as Samuel Whitaker stepped inside, his briefcase in hand, his face serious but kind. He looked around the mansion as if it was a place he knew well. "Your grandfather trusted me with more than his will," Samuel said. "He trusted me with you." By mid-morning, the mansion no longer felt like a lonely fortress. It pulsed with quiet determination. Samuel Whitaker had spread legal documents across the long dining table, each page stamped with Henry Carter's signature. Arthur Hayes moved through the house like a soldier on duty, checking locks, adjusting security cameras. Marion Reynolds, Grandpa's longtime housekeeper, had arrived carrying a folder of journals written by my grandmother. And soon after, Rosa Martinez, his trusted business partner, set up her laptop with spreadsheets and charts to explain how carefully Henry had structured the empire. By noon, more allies had come: Neil Patel, the investment advisor, Diego Ramirez, the estate manager who oversaw security, and even Judge Benjamin Hale, a family friend who had promised Grandpa to act as a neutral witness if disputes arose. I looked around the room, overwhelmed. These people weren't just employees. They were a wall of protection my grandfather had built around me. For the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. But the peace didn't last. At 2 p.m. The sound of tires crunching on gravel shattered the calm. Multiple sleek cars pulled into the driveway, their polished hoods gleaming like predators in the sun. My stomach lurched. "They're here," I whispered. Arthur gave me a reassuring nod before striding toward the front door. He opened it wide. My family flooded inside like a storm. Edward Carter led the charge, his face red with rage, veins bulging at his temples. "This is still our house," he barked. "You have no right to shut us out." Behind him, Margaret swept in, her lips pursed in disdain, her heels stabbing against the marble floor. Brandon followed last, dragging his feet but glaring at me with greedy intensity. I stood tall, though my knees trembled. "Grandpa gave this to me. Legally, morally, every way that matters." "Don't play innocent," Brandon snapped. "You manipulated him. Everyone knows a billion-dollar empire belongs to the family, not some broke piano teacher." Samuel rose calmly, holding up a thick folder. Actually, Henry anticipated these accusations. He left written and video statements confirming Eleanor as his heir. Contesting this will would be futile. Edward snatched the folder from Samuel's hands, flipping through the pages with shaking fingers. "Fabricated," he spat. "You think a judge will take this over the word of his own son?" "Depends on which judge," a deep voice interrupted. All eyes turned as Judge Hale stepped forward from the study's doorway. His presence filled the room with authority. "Your father asked me personally to oversee any disputes. These documents are airtight. You have no claim, Edward." The color drained from my father's face, but rage quickly replaced fear. He jabbed a finger at me. "Ungrateful brat. You're tearing this family apart." I swallowed hard, my voice trembling but steady. "No, you did that long ago when you chose money over love." Margaret's composure cracked. "After everything we gave you, private school lessons, vacations, you repay us like this? $7 billion belongs to the Carters, not to you alone." Marion stepped forward quietly, holding the journals. "Actually, Mrs. Carter, these prove why Henry made his choice. Every visit, every demand, every kindness is documented here." She handed a page to Samuel, who read aloud. "Richard demanded money again. When we refused, he shouted. Eleanor came later with soup and stayed until Harold's fever broke." Silence fell, broken only by the crackling fire. Brandon suddenly lunged forward. slamming his hands on the table. Enough! We don't care about your stupid journals. Just sign the transfer, Eleanor. I need the capital for my platform. Rose's voice cut like glass. He already gave you chances, Brandon. Multiple failed ventures. You burned through money every time. Your grandfather refused for a reason. You never earned it. Brandon's face turned crimson. He glared at me. You think you're better than me? You'll choke under this pressure. You'll come begging for help. I straightened, fire rising in my chest. No, Brandon. For the first time, I'm not the one begging. That's when Edward lost control. With a roar, he swept the documents off the table, scattering them across the floor. This is garbage. None of this changes the truth. This fortune is mine by right. By right. Judge Hale thundered. The will is law. You have no claim, Edward. None. And then, as if fate wanted the final blow, Arthur stepped forward holding a USB drive. Mr. Carter had me install new cameras last year. They recorded something you should see. Samuel plugged it into Rose's laptop. Footage flickered on the screen. Edward, Margaret, and Brandon rifling through drawers in the mansion days after the funeral, stuffing jewelry and documents into bags. My mother gasped. That's taken out of context. But before she could finish, another figure stepped into the room. Chief Laura Benton of the local police, arms crossed. Context won't matter in court. Theft is theft. You're one step away from handcuffs. For the first time, my father faltered. His bluster shrank, his shoulders sagged. My mother's hand shook. Brandon cursed under his breath. I seized the moment, my voice cutting through the tension. I'm done being afraid of you. Grandpa trusted me. You can threaten, scream, steal, but you'll never take his legacy. Not from me. Silence fell heavy. Edward's voice finally broke it, low and venomous. If you walk this path, Eleanor, you are no longer part of this family. I met his gaze steady. You made that choice the moment you tried to destroy me. One by one, they turned and stormed out, doors slamming behind them. Engines roared as their cars disappeared down the drive. The mansion seemed to exhale. For the first time, I felt the power shift, not to them but to me. When the heavy doors slammed behind my parents and brother, the silence in the mansion felt deafening. No more shouts, no more threats. Just the steady tick of the grandfather clock and the crackle of the fire. My chest heaved, my knees threatened to buckle, but then I felt Samuel Whitaker's hand rest gently on my shoulder. You did it, he murmured. For the first time you stood your ground. I nodded weakly, the weight of everything crashing down. I didn't feel victorious, at least not yet. Instead, I felt hollow, as if the last fragile thread of hope for reconciliation had been cut. But then I remembered Grandpa's voice, warm and certain. Stand your ground, Eleanor. Dignity can't be stolen unless you give it away. I hadn't given it away. And that had to be enough. The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and endless decisions. Samuel guided me through the legal minefield with steady patience. Rosa Martinez walked me through the company's operations, explaining how hundreds of employees depended on its stability. Neil Patel showed me Grandpa's meticulous investment strategies. Marion Reynolds and Arthur Hayes kept the mansion running like a heartbeat, never letting me feel alone. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible daughter or the unwanted sibling. I was the one everyone turned to, the one entrusted with a legacy larger than myself. Still, it wasn't easy. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages from Edward, Margaret, and Brandon. Some were threats. We'll sue you until you're broke. Some were manipulative. We're still family, Eleanor. Surely you'll share. And some dripped with false sweetness. Think about all we've sacrificed for you. I never replied. I had nothing left to say. Instead, I poured myself into honoring Grandpa. 3 months later, the Henry Carter Foundation for Education and Community was launched, backed by $2 billion dedicated to scholarships, schools, and local programs. The opening ceremony, I stood on stage with shaking hands as the foundation's banner rippled behind me. A sea of students, teachers, and families filled the hall. Taking a deep breath, I leaned into the microphone. This isn't just money, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's a legacy. My grandfather believed in integrity and hard work, in giving opportunities to those who need them most. Today we carry that forward. Applause thundered through the room. For once, I didn't shrink from it. Life at the mansion slowly transformed. The halls that once echoed with loneliness now rang with warmth and laughter. On Sundays, I hosted dinners, not with my blood relatives, but with the people Grandpa had trusted. Samuel, Rosa, Neil, Marion, Arthur, even employees from the company and their families, we crowded around the long oak table, passing dishes, teasing one another, sharing stories. Marion fussed over me for burning the bread rolls. Rosa taught me to make empanadas. Arthur told stories about Grandpa's stubbornness. And to everyone's surprise, Samuel turned out to play a decent piano piece that it wasn't perfect, but it was real. A family built on choice, loyalty, and love. Not on greed. One crisp autumn morning, I drove alone to the cemetery. The leaves had turned gold, carpeting the ground with warmth. Carrying a bouquet of white lilies, Grandpa's favorite, I knelt at his grave. "Hi, Grandpa," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I hope you can see me. I hope you're proud." The wind rustled the trees as I went on. "The foundation is helping kids, hundreds of them. Some will be the first in their families to go to college. The company is thriving, and your employees are cared for. I think I finally understand. It was never about the billions. It was about the values behind them. About using wealth to build, not destroy." Tears blurred my eyes, but I smiled. "I promise I'll carry that forward. I won't let your name, or your trust, be wasted." A gust of wind swept across the cemetery, scattering leaves around me. For a moment it felt like an answer. That night I sat at the grand piano in the mansion, fingers gliding across the keys. As the last note lingered in the air, I whispered into the silence, "I'll never let you down." And for the first time, peace filled my heart. The fortune wasn't my true inheritance. Integrity was. Thank you for following this story till the end. If you found this an emotional journey of betrayal, justice, and inner strength, please help Revenge Amy reach its first 1,000 subscribers. Just a like and subscribe. Your support will be a great motivation for us to continue bringing more inspiring stories. Click subscribe today and be a part of this journey. See you in the next stories.